Lobsta Productions.
We are being hypnotized by people like this. Newsreaders, politicians, teachers, lecturers. We are in a country and in a world that is being run by unbelievably sick people. The chasm between what we're told is going on and what is really going on is absolutely enormous.
Oh yeah, dude. There's some Nephilim shit.
It's like we all know what's going down, but no one's saying shit what happened to the home of the brave. These motherfuckers, they controlling us now, and no one's talking about how they made us modern-day slaves. And everybody's just walking around, heading the clouds and won't awaken to a dead in the grave. By then it's too late, we need to be ready to raise up. Welcome to the end of days.
Everybody is slaves, only some are aware that the government releasing poison in the air.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Nephilim Death Squad. I am David Lee Corbo, a.k.a. The Raven. That is Top Lobster, the father of disinformation. Before we introduce today's guest, I would like to remind all of our live viewers that this is a 30-minute preview only. Sometime around the 30-minute mark, we'll be going live exclusively to patreon.com/Nephilim Death Squad, where you can continue enjoying an ad-free viewing experience, hanging out in the live chat, and
David.
also gaining early access to the episode. Dude, I hate when I fumble it. It's a nightmare.
We're going to get through this, guys.
We're going to get through it, guys. Gritting our teeth. Head on over to patreon.com/Nephilim Death Squad, and you can sign up for a limited time only for free. Enjoy a 7-day free trial. Try to gain access to as much content as possible, and then get out of there before the billing cycle kicks in. But you won't be able to do it because it is a treasure trove of content. That is patreon.com/Nephilim Death Squad. All right, guys, joining us today is Seven C's. Very happy to have you on the show, Seven. If you could, for the people who may not be familiar with your work, let them know a little bit about what you focus on and where they can find you.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And thank you guys so much for having me. So I'm still relatively new to the scene. I won't lie. I woke up kind of late to the game, so I've been playing catch up and also trying to like stay with the breaking news stories and stuff. But I'm on Iconic, which is David Icke's network, and Twitter and Rumble. I also do weekly live streams every Wednesday. I'll actually be going live later today, where we build out these webs that have sort of become sort of synonymous with me, that tie everybody together and show like the different, you know, board appointments, financial backings, political ties, and stuff like that.
Awesome. Today we're here to talk about this idea of transhumanism, and this is something that I guess we actually haven't touched on very much on the show. I mean, we've touched on it sort of, you know, we'll mention it in one episode or another and how it connects to the bigger picture, but it is something that is seemingly very close on the horizon, and it's being spearheaded in very many ways by Elon Musk, who's found himself tied into the Trump administration. He is one of the, I guess you could call them heroes or characters on the world stage that we're being given right now. And man, because of him, we are on the fast track to some sort of, you know, implant, something that's going to interface with our own brain, something that's going to increase our bandwidth allegedly, or maybe even make people who are blind or people who have cerebral palsy or something like that be able to function again. So there's a lot of promise on the horizon with what I'm getting at, this Neuralink. But of course, there are a lot of huge problems when it comes to inserting technology in your own body. Yeah, and we in the conspiracy community call it transhumanism. Although I did find recently that they're coining a new term, and it's biodigital convergence, I think, is a terminology that's being used. So where do you want to start, Seven?
Are they claiming that they're offended because of the prefix? Is this why they're changing?
I don't know
stuff?
what. No, you know what it is? The only reason I'm even aware of that is because in this game, conspiracy content, if you haven't talked about a thing yet, then you are almost certainly a shill for that thing. So I have been accused of being a shill for not talking about biodigital convergence, which, as I already explained, comes up in a shit ton of episodes. It's just not one that we've dedicated an entire episode yet. So right now, Seven, you're actually here to save us from people that are accusing us of being shills.
Gotcha. And happy to help, and always, appreciate being able to get this information out to people and kind of show them what's really going on behind all the propaganda and all the marketing and the rallies and things that they're doing. So I think that they are being intentional about changing the name from transhumanism to the biodigital convergence, because when you think about like the trans community, right?
We've kind of had our fill with it. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I think there is a lot of rightful negative sentiment towards them. I personally think they're a little crazy myself, but when
Careful, man. It's crazy out there.
Yeah, I know.
Right,
It.
yeah. You're gonna end up getting doxxed and they're gonna show up to your house. Yeah, that's how crazy it ends up getting.
But I think that the trans movement was sort of like a dipping a toe in the pool of transhumanism. So when it comes to like biological augmentation, getting those gender reassignment surgeries, taking hormones and stuff, was this introducing this concept to people of altering your body and your physical form and your DNA even, because the hormones get down to you in a genetic level, and it's shit that you can't really end up reversing, and they push it on kids and stuff, and
right.
I think that's why they're trying to like rebrand the whole name and get away from that, even though it's exactly the same thing.
Hey, Seven, I just want to give you a heads up here. We're on YouTube, but say whatever you want. Say exactly what you mean, because we do edit this later anyway. Like, it'll just take out the words. So, like, we've been doing a lot of dancing around, like, experimental gene therapy. It's like, no, it's a vaccine. It's much easier to just type in that word and then we'll remove it. But say what you mean so the people really understand what we're getting at, because it's ridiculous that we can't express exactly what we're talking about when there's been a campaign, studied campaign for many years that we're revealing to basically do this stuff and get certain effects. Well, I think
so you can say, in other words, you can say,
Okay.
all right, this entire topic is one that is certainly a double-edged sword, right? I mean, where does the line, maybe we could start with a philosophical question. It's like, where does the line start when it crosses over from a medical intervention? Let's say, like, when I was a kid, I always said, man, imagine how crazy it would be if I lost my arm and then I got a bionic arm. Is a bionic arm bad necessarily, right? Or these fiberglass, like, we're not talking about people who lose their legs and are amputees and then get those kind of fiberglass legs so that they can run again. I mean, that's tremendous, right? That's beautiful. But it does kind of feel like where we're going, the idea of like the road to hell is paved with good intentions, right? We have this thing that we're laying out. Well, what about the blind? What about people with cerebral palsy? What about things like that? It's like, don't you want them to be alleviated of their ailment? Don't you want them to be able to? Of course. But where does that line then exist when we're crossing over into the no-go zone? Oh, yeah. For some reason, we lost the audio on 7. I think right now we're talking too much about Elon Musk, and he's decided to hack our equipment.
Are you, can you hear us? No.
He can hear us. You can't hear him. That's strange. What you could do, 7, is you could refresh your entire browser. It'll pop you right back into here. And sometimes we have these issues when it comes to, there you go. He'll be back in a second. Just because, I do recognize that there's a place for it. But then, when you start putting things in my brain, is that the line? Where do you think it is, Top?
Putting things in your brain, maybe putting things in your teeth. I don't know.
Ooh, that's true. Go ahead, 7. Sound off.
Can you hear me?
There we go. We can hear you.
All right. So I do think that it is important to sort of make that distinction when it comes to where do we draw the line specifically. And, like glasses would technically be considered like, self-augmentation and stuff. And I think that the real dividing line is when you start introducing things that relent your autonomy or ability to like have self-agency, like a fiberglass prosthetic leg is one thing. Where you can control, take it off when you want. But if you get a bionic thing that can be hacked or, spied on, when it comes to like biometric wearables and stuff that are scanning your stuff and collecting it and sending it off to some shadow tech company in a database somewhere, or, especially with the brain chip where, they're basically just trying to do the MK Ultra style, put electrodes in your brain and control your thoughts and,
right.
things like that. And I think that's because I've had some people say like, well, what about, eyeglasses? Are you against those and stuff? And I'm not. It's just that it is a slippery slope to these other things as we like boil the frog and keep going along.
We've got to be careful with that stuff, right? Because there are people that are well, all right, so I'm not going to get you in trouble or anything, but there are people like you have like Whitney Webb and even David Icke, and they've been early adopters warning us about a lot of these things. And I'm like, I see some of these things as very useful tools. So David Icke is warning about Elon Musk and X, and he's 100% correct. But I'm like, well, this is how I'm proliferating my message. And we kind of have to use that. Like I have to pay for this blue check mark to boost my algorithm in order to say this stuff. Otherwise, I'll be saying it to nobody. So there's like this weird double-edged sword, like the idea with the glasses that you're talking about. It's like, how far are we willing to contribute to, the AI Grok learning machine? I don't know, but we're so far gone at this point where I'm like, you know what, just jump in and we have to start saying something. We can't just be passengers.
There is something to say too about before you integrate a technology with your own anatomy, right? There is still these negative implications. So for example, the idea that back in the day, they used to say, you shouldn't let the kids use calculators. They have to figure out how to engage with the mathematics, in their own way so that they can come to the conclusions instead of having the robot do it for them. And in many ways, that it used to be, you're not always going to have a calculator. And then fast forward in the future, and we all have one. It's always in our pocket. But it has been to our detriment, right? It's like, what good is it to have the access to all of this information if you're not exercising your mind in a way that enables you to come to these conclusions on your own accord? And when we have Grok, right, not only are we feeding this algorithm, but in many ways, Grok is the new search engine, and which is kind of weird because it often seems to be incorrect, or even, I don't want to say deceitful, but it'll give you one answer, and if you press it again, it'll give you another answer. And it seems like the first one was incorrect, but under a little bit of scrutiny, suddenly Grok yields.
It's like, what do you want to hear? What do you like?
Honestly, and I think that is it. What do you want to hear is what Grok is telling you. So what happens before we even cross that threshold of implementing something in our own mind, like a Neuralink, but we're all being dumbed down because we're looking to this artificial intelligence as a Google search sort of function, and it's giving us information that is incorrect. Sometimes it is correct, but we're not coming across it on our own. I mean, that has to be, even that, if you looked at the implications of that, I would imagine you would see a steep decline in our problem solving abilities, our critical thinking skills.
Yeah, I think that anytime someone like posts something under one of my things trying to like refute something that I've said, and it's just a screenshot of what Grok spits out, people don't realize that, they're collecting every single thing that you post, that, X has permissions on your phone to be able to go into your other apps and see your activity there, your geolocation data, things that you're texting back and forth to people. And it is simply an ego stroking machine, in my opinion, where it's just going to double down on those confirmation biases and pretend like it's teaching you something. But like you said, if me and you were to type in the same question word for word exactly, it's going to spit out two completely different answers. And I feel like more often than not, it's just like confirmation bias.
Yes.
It seems like,
oh, go ahead, Tom.
It seems like Grok uses your Twitter account. So if you ask it a question like, can I do this? And it'll go, let me look at the stuff that you like. And it'll go and it'll show you the accounts that you may follow or have come in contact with. It aggregates that information, combines it, and then gives you like basically a loose opinion on whatever you've been looking at already. It is very interesting in that way. And I like to use it as a little bit of a battering ram. It's really fun, but it might not be accurate information, which is fantastic in this age of America where I think we've been in post-information America for at least 5 years, 6 years
What's
now.
What's Cashman call it? Post-reality?
Post-reality. I think there was another guy that was calling it post, I forget exactly what it was, like post-rationalism.
Post-truth is where we are, yeah.
And I think the fact of the matter is that the truth doesn't really matter anymore because it's so subjective and all over the place. It's kind of like the last thing somebody said or the last fake picture you saw, that is the truth. And honestly, I'm operating that way now, like where you can just push through and that is the truth now. The latest thing said, it's sad, but is what it is, man.
A great example of that Grok just telling you what you want to hear is we've all suddenly been asking Grok over the past 24 hours, based off of my tweets, what celebrity or historical figure or something like that do I most bear resemblance to? And what I discovered is when I asked Grok that privately, it's a very interesting thing because I asked Grok privately and it told me that I resembled Hunter S. Thompson, which of course I was flattered. Of course I want to hear that. And then all of a sudden I look to the timeline and everybody is getting called Hunter S. Thompson. And then interestingly enough, when I asked Grok based off of my tweets, how long is my penis? It actually didn't say anything. It refused to respond. And that's not even a joke. And I don't know what that means. Like, why the f- is Grok responding to everybody telling them like, you seem to be Hunter S. Thompson or some other favorable celebrity or historical figure. But then when you ask it something else, and I'm not saying that that something else is restricted to penis size. I'm just saying that when I engaged with it on a totally different topic, it just flat out refused to respond. So I don't know which is also a weird thing. Is Grok busy? Like what's going on there where it selectively answers you and then other times flat out ignores you? I get the feeling sometimes, and I've been talking about this a little bit, that when I interact with Grok recently, let's say past month, which I think is about how long they've rolled out the new beta for whatever, version of Grok exists now, it feels like a person, which is very unsettling.
Yeah. Yeah, I think what they're trying to do is sort of condition people to see it as like another appeal to authority or information, and it's eventually going to be like this gate. I mean, Google was the king of gatekeeping information, and it's been proven that they've censored shit all throughout the years. Sergey Brin is no stranger to like the CIA, and he went to Stanford, which is basically just a recruiting ground for the CIA and people like Peter Thiel. And it's this way where the government can introduce the tools that they want to enforce on the public, but they hide it behind the private sector so that it seems like it's organic or not as nefarious as they plan for it to be. And I just see it as a huge Trojan horse. I've the Grok profile I've actually blocked so that when people try to tag it under my comments, it can't respond.
That's a good idea.
Yeah. And like, especially with, knowing everything that I know about Elon, his past, his ties to his grandfather, the Saturn imagery, as far as I'm concerned, people like to say it's a black hole, which is just a singularity, which is the merging of man and machine. And I'm like, okay, well, point stands, so.
Yeah. Why not both? Right. In some ways, before we go there, I kind of want to take a segue, and then, what you're talking about there is going to be huge for this conversation. But you posted something the other day that I found fascinating, and it was hard for me to understand because but I'm looking at this thing that you posted, and it's like all of the various people who are contributing through sponsorship or one way or another financially to Joe Rogan. What conclusions did you draw from that map? It was kind of a map.
Yeah, so that was sort of a product of a live stream that I did called Lies and Ties, and it's basically, hey, everyone's allowed in the chat. If you guys have something that links, two people together, throw me sources. We'll verify it directly on live streams. And I just went to his list of sponsors that he had over the years and just started mapping out who owns this. Where does this money come from? What did this end up turning into? And I've seen a lot of people post Matthew North, I believe his name was, who did something way more in depth than I did, and he is actually passed. He died to a gunshot wound to the head in his car very shortly after coming out with that video, which concerning. And just sort of digging through everything and seeing all these financial ties to things like Israel. And I mean, he has a sponsor that's owned by Tully and Friedman, and I believe it was Tully and Friedman that was part of the Salomon Brothers, which is the Salomon Brothers building, WTC7.
Yes. Wow.
Yeah, and Tully and Friedman actually helped Kronos, the company that was responsible for contact tracing and stuff during COVID.
Speaking of Saturn.
Yeah. And it's just you start to see this pattern. And I don't know Joe personally, and I don't like have any ill will towards anybody that doesn't try to exert like their authority on me or anything. But to me, it seems like, especially with how big he is and how financed he is and stuff, that there is authoritarian interest in using him as sort of a conduit to whether it's like whitewash certain people. I mean, he's had Peter Thiel on there.
Oops. Oh, sorry about that, Seven.
You're
Sometimes
good.
that little thing. So this is actually did you make this yourself?
Yeah. So we map all these things out.
That's so cool, man.
Yeah, we do these manually. And I know like a lot of people have way better maps, but typically I've found that they do them like AI generated. So they'll like take a database somewhere and feed it in, and then it draws
This is
a model.
insane, dog.
This is insane. It's so great though. I mean, it's refreshing to find people who are doing research and creating something original.
This is literally the meme, the "It's Always Sunny" meme with the guy just pointing at the wall. I love it. Oh my god!
You know what you need, dude? You have to. I'm sorry, but you got to do this, Seven. You got to get in front of a version of this and point to it, like an insane person, like Charlie Day from. Because this is great. This is quality schizo posting, but like any good quality schizo post, when you look at it, when you scrutinize it, you find out something is here. Actually.
It's actually kind of insane because when you compare it to like some of my other maps, that is light work.
Really?
Yeah.
There you go. There you go. This is schizo art, and I love it. Shout out to Zoom Out in the chat.
So the first couple of episodes that we did of the live stream, I actually started with Elon Musk and Peter Thiel. And if you guys want, I can screen share real quick and show.
Yeah.
Oh my god, you weren't joking, dog. Look what is going on here. This is crazy.
Holy shit.
Yeah, there you go.
I gotta make this full screen, baby. What the? Look at all these people. Somebody's sweating. They're looking over at Seven's profile, and they see this get posted, and there's a bunch of people right now that have clenched assholes and are breaking out in hot splashes. And that's incredible, man. Very cool. Very cool.
I appreciate it, and I get a lot of flack for like, oh, you're just playing like 6 ways to bacon of politics, and I'm like, okay, well, when we look at things like the Epstein network and all the people that were associated with that and stuff, it's like you can't deny that associations matter. I look at like JD Vance, right? He's obviously Thiel's protege. Well, he met Thiel when Thiel went to go give a speech at Yale while JD Vance was there. And also JD Vance was going to Yale with Vivek Ramaswamy, and they're really good friends. So much so that JD Vance's son is named Vivek after Vivek Ramaswamy.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's so funny to me though.
Yeah,
Holy shit.
And then people want to, chalk it up to coincidence that JD Vance, Vivek, Peter Thiel are all influential in Donald Trump's campaign. Peter Thiel was backing Donald Trump in his first term.
It's just a coincidence, dog. What are you talking about?
I always like to say there's no such things as coincidences with these people.
I agree. I agree with that sentiment very much. So, okay, the reason this is fascinating when it comes to Rogan and what you've mapped out here, and how it connects to this bigger picture, I think it's important that we say this here, Top, because we had some developments yesterday, and this is really us speaking to the audience. So a lot of you guys who are listening to the show are familiar with the fact that Top and I have been unpacking this connection, right, between the telepathy tapes and between autism and all these different things. And it's kind of become our obsession over this last month. And we've made lots of appearances on other shows talking about this, and we've unpacked quite a bit of it on our own show. Towards the tail end of that, we started talking about the likelihood that Ian Carroll was going to step into this arena, and that arena being this exact topic that we're concerned about. Yesterday, all of a sudden, Ian Carroll releases his episode on the telepathy tapes, which, is the subject matter at hand, and makes colloquially the same connections that very lightly. He's not really going into depth, but he is talking about, the vaccine schedule, UFO disclosure very lightly. He just kind of mentions aliens, right? Autism and telepathy and the intelligence agencies and how all these things play together. I would argue that we're still safe because Ian did not touch on the actual meat of this theory, But man, it screams to us that we're over the target in the very best of ways, right? Because one of two things is either happening here. It's either that Ian Carroll has stumbled upon our work in one way, shape, or form and has, kind of claimed it as his own, which I don't necessarily think is the case, but it could be. But that's good if that happens, because in my opinion, that means that our research has enough weight that somebody finds it interesting, somebody like Ian Carroll, or he stumbled upon this organically, which is just as valuable to us because that means so did we, and this thing is very worth stumbling upon. So the way that this fits in to this conversation, Seven, is part of this entire picture that we're looking at with the telepathy tapes involves Elon Musk. And of course, it involves Neuralink. So Elon Musk recently put out was it a patent or a trademark top? It was a trademark, wasn't it?
Yeah. A trademark on the words telekinesis and telepathy, but it's going to be housed under his company Neuralink, and they specify that it's like obviously we can't patent the whatever telekinesis and telepathy are, but they're going to be. It seems like they're going to develop features within the Neuralink that are going to be named this. What those features will do, you guess, but. Yeah, it's just a bit alarming as that's happening now.
So, go ahead, Seven.
I was just going to say, I know that for sure the telekinesis one is the brain chip's ability to interact with devices like mouse cursors and stuff. So you're able to move things with your mind. He's actually got a guy that I think he's quadriplegic that has been testing one and like playing games with it and stuff, and he had referenced that technology as like telekinesis in the past.
So I'm assuming telepathy would be the ability to communicate with other Neuralink participants, through your mind. Okay.
Yep. Honestly,
it's just funny. It's funny how it's all happening now, though, right?
Yes. Yeah. And it's kind of a genius move on his behalf because even if it's not actual telepathy, even if it's not actual telekinesis, these words are everybody's familiar with them. So if you're going to create something that's even akin to it and you could actually trademark that terminology, like I think that's a very smart move. Honestly, I'm not going to put the chip in my brain, but I would say, hey, good move, man, because everybody knows what that is. And anybody else that's competition is going to have to come up with a stupid ass word, a new one in order to, identify what function it is that theirs serves. But there is a very strong connection here, and we're not going to unpack too much of it or else the whole show will be about it. But you have these nonverbal autistic children who are displaying, telepathic powers, and then you have everybody's favorite autist who wants to put this chip in your brain, who's trademarking, terminologies like telepathy and telekinesis, all at the time where this topic is reaching critical mass. I mean, we're talking about a podcast that was popularized by Joe Rogan, and he does play a role in this, I would suspect, popularized to the extent that it becomes the number one podcast in the world.
We're going to need a new map, bro.
Yeah, you're going to need a new map. There's going to be a really weird map, too. But it's popularized by the biggest podcast in the world and then becomes the biggest podcast in the world for a time. It kicks Joe Rogan out of the number one spot. And so, and then, of course, Joe Rogan has Ian Carroll on the show, and the telepathy tapes are resurrected in a massive way. And so to us, Seven, the connection that we're drawing here among many is that the Central Intelligence Agency has programs like MK Ultra, where basically what they're doing is they are creating either latent psychic abilities like the Montauk Project or suggestibility by, inducing some sort of trauma, creating a dissociative identity disorder, and then being able to kind of mind control you, right? This is what the roots of the MK Ultra program is. So when we look at these children from the telepathy tapes, my concern is, why are we saying, and this narrative is developing, that the very thing that these autistic kids are displaying is the next step in human evolution? That's much of like the whispers that are going around, that this is another step. We're evolving, we're ascending, that telepathy and telekinesis are things that are on the horizon for the development of mankind. But I look at these kids as being traumatized and developing dissociative identity disorders because they are trapped in their bodies and have to dissociate. So I don't think that telepathy is the superpower that they're painting it out to be. And I don't think it's the next step in human evolution. I suspect we can always do it, or have always been able to do it, but it's been suppressed through whatever, the crap they're spraying in the sky and the things that we're eating in our food and yada, yada. But it's very concerning. Why is that narrative developing when these kids are traumatized? Why is that narrative developing that this is the next step in evolution when these kids are disassociating with their bodies, and that's what's enabling them to do these things? And then all of a sudden, Elon Musk comes along and does this. Not only that, but the last thing I'll say, and I really kind of want to get your thoughts on this, Evan, which is why I'm rambling like a madman, is Joe Rogan has this interesting habit of introducing MK Ultra apparatus to the public. And what I mean by that is he popularizes the float tanks, right? John C. Lilly is the guy who really pioneered the float tanks, but he's using endogenous dumps of psychedelics to jerk off dolphins and communicate with them telepathically. And then all of a sudden,
that's legit. That's not a joke.
That's actually legit. That's 100%. And I don't know what, one thing I don't know is 100% is apparently the dolphins themselves when he stopped them off.
They stopped eating. So
they stopped eating.
He had his team was them off, and then I guess he told us
off too.
Probably. I mean, listen, when you get a hand in there, let's be real, guys.
Jerk these dolphins off, baby.
The orders come down from him or from somebody to his team, and they're like, we're not going to jerk these dolphins off anymore, and then they just stop eating, and then they die. That's what happens.
Wouldn't you?
But they knew.
If your wife stopped you off, wouldn't you just like you go on a hunger strike? Wouldn't you? You'd be like, I'm not eating dinner.
The thing is, like, this is the question. You wouldn't know when she would have decided to stop doing that to you, but they knew that the people were going to stop, and once they figured out that they were not going to do this anymore, they stopped eating, and then boom, they
weren't like, hey, why hasn't it happened in a while? They were like, I'm picking up that there's been a decision made, and they're gonna not jerk us off anymore. So either way, the MK Ultra program becomes very fascinated with John C. Lilly's research. Also, of course, psychedelics play a massive role in all of the MK Ultra programs, including what John C. Lilly was doing. Joe Rogan created a psychedelic renaissance here in the West in a massive way. He is responsible for, right now, there's a conga line of white women with dreadlocks heading to the Amazon to go drink ayahuasca right now. And it's because of him, right? And then, of course, you look at the way that Joe Rogan plays in intimately with Elon Musk. I don't know what to make of this, but in my mind, Seven, there's a map that looks very much like the ones that you're creating, right? But I certainly can't get it down on paper. What do you think of that? Is that schizo ramblings, or do you think that there's a through line there?
No, I absolutely do think that there's something sort of more nefarious at play, you know, when, especially like speaking to psychedelics and stuff, the one of the number one terms that I see associated with that is neuroplasticity, right? Yes. And being able to change the mind and change the way that the neurons interact with each other and get activated. And that just makes people more susceptible to the influences around them. And when we have, you know, X blasting psyops at us 24/7 and things like that, I think it makes people more susceptible, especially when you consider the trauma aspect to it too. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but when 9/11 happened, I was in school and the teacher turned it on the TV, and I just have seen that. Like, I was in 3rd grade, and you know, seeing that sort of thing, that like mass event, I think has severe, you know, psychological undertones that aren't really ever explored. And the constant like news cycle of, you know, we're about to go into World War III and stuff like that spikes your cortisol.
Have you seen it in Studio Ghibli though?
Oh no, I haven't.
Dog. Well, now you have.
Looks
amazing. Great. It does look great. I wish it happened this way.
I wish that's how I remembered it. You know, to your point though, Seven, I remember that too, man. They rolled that little TV into my my elementary school. I was in 5th grade,
and they were like, "Look at it, shit."
Yeah, they're like, "Hey, look at these guys jumping out of the towers. Your parents will be here to pick you up soon." And so, like, it was really, yeah. As far as a trauma event, that was definitely one.
Yeah, no, you know, there's been studies that show that when your cortisol is spiked, like from stress or anxiety and stuff like that, you become more susceptible to influence. And I think it's sort of like this 2-part war on the mind that they're doing. And it's leaving a lot of people, you know, mentally damaged and incapable of sort of coming to terms with their own existence. And then they just try to find these other escapes. Like, I think that's where the trans, you know, community comes from. And, you know, as you said, with like autism and the dissociative identity disorder, like, I think these are products of the government having experimented on us through like mass, you know, mental manipulations. And we're just now starting to notice the patterns and the effects of these things on kids.
Yeah, I have begun to look at the vaccine schedule as just an arm of the MK Ultra program, and maybe that's not the best way to sum it up. I use the terminology MK Ultra as a general terminology to describe our intelligence agencies and their fascination with human psychology, specifically trauma, and then it's, you know, whatever results that it yields. And like you said, it's either a dissociative identity disorder that opens you up to suggestibility, or it's a, you know, I've been talking about the sensationalized version of the Montauk Project, where you are traumatizing children to expose latent psychic abilities, and that's where we get Stranger Things. And I think it is also worth mentioning that the same thing happens. Childhood trauma often begets schizophrenia, which is an identity dissociative disorder, or at least it's akin to it, right? Because your identity is fundamentally what is thrown into chaos if you are somebody who experiences schizophrenia. And then, of course, that opens up this whole thing to what is schizophrenia? Is it demonic possession, or is it a chemical imbalance in the brain? We tend to err on the former, that it is influenced by entities outside of yourself. And if that is true, then all of this becomes very murky, right? It's like you're experiencing telepathy, you're getting downloads, you're getting voices. What are those voices? Who are these entities that you're communicating with? And that doesn't seem to be a question that's really, especially when it comes to like the telepathy tapes, for example, it's not one that they're asking. They're just enamored with the fact that these children are having some sort of psychic interaction. And it seems that very few of these parents are like, what are you interacting with? Is this dangerous? What is this thing's nature? And there was like one in particular who was a little bit skeptical, but that part of the conversation is conveniently left out when it comes to Elon Musk, who is spearheading this in very many ways, but is very willing to say that us engaging with AI is us summoning the demon. Very fascinating language to use that doesn't show itself again, right? It doesn't come up again. He's just going forward with this and talking about putting this in your brain and now patenting or trademarking telepathy. But what happened to that talk about demons, Elon?
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and especially like when you know, you bring up the topic of MK Ultra. One person that I always like to point to is Donald Ewan Cameron, who was a massive part of the MK Ultra program, and a lot of people don't know that he was very, very highly revered in like the psychiatric medicine field. I mean, he was the president of the American Psychiatric Association, the Canadian Psychiatric Association, the American Psychopathological Association, Society of Biological Psychiatry, and the World Psychiatric Association. He's considered like the father of psychiatry, and it was through this MK Ultra stuff that he figured a lot of these things out. And then the psychiatric medical field just sort of modeled itself after his work and the things that he found. Then MK Ultra comes out. He gets, you know, smeared all over the place, and then dies mysteriously in a hiking trip with his son, like a few months later. But they co-opted all of his work and pushed that through like therapy, psychiatry, and stuff like that. I'll personally never go to therapy. I feel like it's just MK Ultra light, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, the people that are giving you therapy are out of their minds. So
yes,
that's one clue. I see he started here in he received funding in 1957, which is the time frame that all of this stuff seems to go down. Like you've got Operation Paperclip, and then the next decade after, they're just moving, and they are breakneck. They probably broke this guy's neck. No, he had a heart attack. They got him with the heart attack gun. That's actually, which might be an invention of Andrija Puharich and his elf waves, his extremely he's out. His extremely low frequency wave technology. It's a whole thing.
I was talking to my wife, and she was telling me about how this like TikTok story or saga she was following was all about how a couple decided that it was best to go to couples therapy. And you know, you expect this person to not have a biased point of view and to kind of guide you both. Instead, it was the therapist suggested, well, why don't you guys come in individual visits? Stop coming together. And then found out that she was telling the wife one thing and the husband another. And the thing she was telling the husband is like, leave your wife. And the other thing that sticks out in my mind is a video that I saw recently. I don't know. I wish I could attribute who this was, because this is really good research. But what they did was they came up with a list of symptoms, and then they went to various therapists and psychologists and things like that. I don't know the difference between the two, honestly. I think it's the ability to prescribe. One has it and one doesn't. So whichever one he goes to, he presents the same symptoms to all of these. I think it was like 5 or 6 different doctors, and they gave him, each one of them, a completely different medication and a completely different diagnosis, which is exactly what's been happening since the explosion in like mental health awareness here in the United States. I was subjected to it. They put me on Adderall as a child, and all based off of a chemical imbalance in the brain that they've never been able to prove. So yeah, I agree. It's like therapy and psychology. It's regarded as this shining beacon of a medical institution, but really it's based off of very little. You know, if you go, what is it, Freud? It's like everything is just about banging your mom. You really wanted to bang your mom, and that's why you behave the way that you do. And now we've moved into like, okay, maybe it's not about banging your mom. It's just about an innocuous chemical imbalance. Just take these pills and everything will be fine.
Yeah. And then in my opinion, that just leads to like transhumanism. You know, you're using chemicals to change what's in your brain and shit like that. Who knows what's in these, you know, certain medications. They're going to say it's one thing, but honestly, the entire medical industry, in my opinion, is just one giant fraud that was created by the Rockefellers. So
yes.
You know.
By the way, it's worth mentioning, what do these SSRIs that are commonly prescribed induce? They often induce a dissociative identity disorder. That's mostly what they induce, right? Like I've got an aunt who is schizophrenic, and years ago when I talked to her about it, she's like, yeah, when I take the medication they give me, I just don't even feel like me. I don't feel like me. I don't feel like I'm in control. I feel like a zombie. I feel like I'm, she described it as being like really far back away from the controls. And I don't know, through that lens, I often wonder, and this is something we've been talking about a lot in the show, Seven, is like you had the MK Ultra program, it allegedly shut down. And I think all that happened was they were ready for mass rollout. They were ready to scale it up, and they were ready to roll it out to the masses. And now what we have is free range MK Ultra patients. You know what I mean? It's like we're all inundating ourselves with the propaganda through our phones. We're all drugging ourselves in whatever it is, if it's marijuana with a massively dialed up dose of THC, and it induces this like constant state of anxiety. Meanwhile, the CBD has been sacrificed tremendously. And so we're all on these like low grade psychedelics, and we're all just submitting ourselves to the propaganda machine. We are free range MK Ultra chickens.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I completely agree. And, you know, you did see this sort of that same rebranding where, you know, the Rockefellers were tied to like programs back in the day. And then all of a sudden he's influencing all of the medical industry and working with this lady named Mary Lasker, who's considered like the fairy godmother of health. But really she was responsible for creating like multiple columns of the National Institutes of Health. A lot of people think it's just institute, but it's like an umbrella term that, you know, you have like the American Heart Association, the American Cancer Association, and essentially she was married to this man named Albert Lasker, who would, he was like a big marketing guy. He came up with like doing slogans and logos and stuff. He promoted things like Lucky Strikes, the cigarettes. And then all of a sudden, you know, Mary Lasker, 20 years later, after everyone's starting to get like lung cancer and shit like that, is like, okay, well, now we have to fund these studies, and we're going to get taxpayer money to fund them, and then we're going to present these to politicians, and then we're going to set up the American Cancer Society. Did the same thing with orange juice. Like Albert Lasker is the reason that we think that orange juice is associated with breakfast. And then people start getting diabetes and shit like that. And then his wife comes in, you know, lobbies politicians to fund these studies. She was connected directly with the Rockefellers. If she actually has a street named after her that's like right by the Rockefeller University or the Rockefeller Foundation building. I can't remember which. But it's like those two kind of Albert and Mary Lasker sort of like played hand in hand with each other to manufacture the problem and then provide the agenda-based solution. And that's where we get like tons of these vaccines. She was really big into, she was part of this thing that was very catered towards like black people. I can't say the name of the project, I think, on here, but
is this, wait, she's working with Margaret Sanger?
Yeah, they worked very closely together with each other.
That's funny. No, I'm going to go ahead and say it because so I was thinking about that while you were talking about it, right? It's like so many of the institutions that we think are here for our benefit are actually here to our detriment. And it brought to mind Margaret Sanger, who was not a big fan of the blacks and also a big fan of who ends up creating Planned Parenthood. And then you look at who's the number. It's so funny to even use the expression Planned Parenthood because you're actually planning to not be a parent when you go there. And who's the number one visitor to Planned Parenthood? Who's getting that? Which race is getting the highest amount of abortions? It turns out that the black community is. And there's a plethora of reasons as to why that is. But somewhere in some sort of astral realm, the spirit of Margaret Sanger is just rubbing those hands together, just looking at her handiwork. But it's funny because so much of what we identify as like culture, none of it is or not none of it. Some of it has to be organic, but so much of it is not. Like I was thinking about how when America went through the fat-free craze and they were taking all the fat out of the milk, which ends up creating a shit ton of cheese, they ended up with a cheese surplus. And they start figuring out like, how the hell are we going to get rid of all this cheese? So they coin the term melty and Kraft launches a campaign where they start to make all these commercials, you know, where they stretch the grilled cheese apart and they say, look how melty it is. And all of that is just, it's like even the minutia, the simplest shit in the world, melty cheese, even that was created as a means to, or another great example, the Moscow Mule, which is a popular drink that everybody was drinking, I don't know, like 7 years ago or something like that. And they were served in these little hammered copper mugs.
Wait a second. There's a conspiracy for Moscow Mules. That's my drink.
It's not much of a conspiracy. It's just like there was a copper excess and they were trying to figure out how to move more of it. So they popularized the drink.
Wow.
And with the drink came this little adorable hammered copper cup that I ended up owning, and everybody that I knew owned one.
Yeah, I got one.
And that's it. So they're just figuring out, how do we market it? How do we offload this shit? So
well, David,
through that lens,
do you know what there's an excess of right now?
Oh my God. We gave these people 48 minutes.
It's in excess of 4 people in our show. It's incredible.
Guys.
That's
Listen,
the smell. I've been wondering.
That's what it is. I've been wondering what the smell was. If you guys want to continue watching this show, sounding off in the chat, enjoying an ad-free viewing experience, you could do so over at patreon.com/Nephilim Death Squad. And you could do so for free. I know we make fun of you guys for being poor, but you can go here and sign up for free and continue watching this episode. I have no idea why you wouldn't. Don't be poor and lazy. That's despicable. Otherwise, guys, we're going exclusively there. So we will catch you later. And bye-bye. Okay, so yeah, it you know what it leaves me, Seven, to ponder is like, if they're doing it on that small of a scale, the stupid Moscow Mule, the melty cheese, like what is genuine anymore? How much are they really doing this? Because it feels like it's a lot.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, especially, you think about the fact that, Unilever owns like 80% of the grocery store and shit, and it's like you have the illusion of this free choice when in all actuality they're all just corralling you to the same place anyway. I've found that with things like that, being local, finding very small thing. I buy most of my food from like farmers that I know directly, that I've had conversations with, and they're like Bill Gates and George Soros and Monsanto, and they'll never put like the Bover stuff. I get raw milk from them and stuff.
Hell yeah,
I drink that all the time now. And yeah, that was actually funny because I realized that the Rothschilds only ever gave like 2 speeches at that UK assembly. One was to justify the creation of Israel, and the other was to tell everyone to pasteurize their milk. And there's got to be something behind
what
that.
The fuck is going on there? That's a weird message. Like, what are we going to talk about today? 2 really important things, actually.
Yeah, Israel. I actually have the shirt that you mentioned, the Jewish trick. This actually sells well.
Yeah,
orange juice, Jewish trick, not from concentration camps.
Unbelievable. You know what sucks too is like I really like orange juice, but I realize like what happens when you tear down the structure of fruit, you just have free floating sugars that your body just turns into fat like right away.
Yeah.
You get diabetes. So if you're gonna have oranges, eat the oranges, guys. But yeah, man, I don't know. It just feels like more and more culture maybe is not good. And what's interesting about that is we've been made to associate culture with a positive term, because a lot of like the that victim culture that went along with disenchanted communities or disenfranchised communities like the Black community or the LGBT community, one of the things would be to champion your culture. And the more I sit here and I look back, I'm like, I don't know that culture is good at all, because I don't think that culture. I've been saying this, and I could be wrong, as I often am, but I'm looking at, like, speaking of culture and cultural manufacturing, I'm looking at Rogan as potentially like the new, like, Laurel Canyon, right? Where, they used to manufacture our entertainers. They gave us the Doors. They gave us Jim Morrison. The anti-war movement. They gave us the psychedelic movement. And, like, it's kind of like what he's doing. And then when you look at, who he's connected to or whatever, I don't think that makes him a bad guy necessarily. You have no idea the power these people wield and the influence that they have. And so who the hell knows? I just know when you have the biggest platform in the world, the wolves are going to come in. And either you can play ball with them, or you can try to resist and then end up playing ball with them. You know what I mean? So I'm not saying Rogan is this definitive bad guy. What I do recognize, though, is it's almost the same playbook.
Yeah, and I mean, it's, when you look at, like, the fact that he got a $250 million contract from things like Spotify, and then you go and see that Peter Thiel gave Spotify very early seed money. The CEO of Spotify has spoken at, like, Bilderberg meetings. He invited Mark Zuckerberg to his wedding. They're that close. And it's like, I don't think they'd be giving him this much money and this much power and, like, boosting him into the algorithms and stuff like they do if he was in any way sort of a risk to the status quo or the powers that be.
But I mean, come on, dude. Mark Zuckerberg's really cool. He does jujitsu
He
now.
does jujitsu.
He's got hair like me. He wears a chain and shit. I mean, guys, let's get with the times, right?
I think we need to pull back some of that Zuckerberg judgment, because he is a cool guy, and I think we may have judged him too harshly.
It's an interesting decision to, like, it's a conscious decision on their part to keep him around, right? They're like, we got to rebrand this guy for some reason. Like, why not just get another robot? Like, you could deactivate, decommission this one, and put another guy with a Chinese wife in here, and nobody would have batted an eye. But
He's
they're
like,
keeping him.
No, please. He's like, I got Riz. I'm like, what? Riz? Fine. Come on up.
He's talking to the lizard people. He's like, please let me just do a little jujitsu. I promise in a year. They're like, fine.
Well, it kind of did work, right? Because in the same way that, like, people have softened up on Zuckerberg, I see the same thing happening with like a George Bush Jr., where suddenly he's like an adorable old man. So that you could rebrand endlessly in front of us is what I'm getting at, because we have no long-term memory whatsoever. And if you just do the right thing or say the right based thing at the time, then, you're in, baby.
Yeah, I think the Kool-Aid is very strong these days, and especially with, like, the state of the world, I guess, and everybody individually. It's like people are always looking for these things to latch on to, that, there's somebody fighting for me. There's someone out there that understands me and are championing the things that I agree with. And it's like, man, they're just speaking rhetoric to get your trust so that they can find some way to pivot you back into the agenda,
Man, and I don't know if I'm guilty of part of it, but I'm like, I feel like we have to have some sort of hope, right? Like, again, so I was proven wrong about the RFK Jr. stuff, but what are our options here? I mean, realistically,
go ahead.
I was just gonna say we could stop putting faith in human beings, like, these dudes that they keep rolling out in front of us, and they keep getting, like, super based, and RFK's like jacked, and he's all remember what I was talking about, Top, that narrative of, like, the Trump administration is like the Avengers for conspiracy theorists.
Yeah.
And it almost felt like a way to disarm us.
I'm not saying to, like, don't put your faith in this guy. He can barely talk. What I'm saying is that, like, they're presenting us an option that is, this guy says that he's going to stop putting in the food. And I was like, if he does it, great. But I'm like, I don't see a point in, like, fighting and arguing with this dude. I was like, he said he's going to do it. He's going to get in whether he does it or not. Like, I mean, I think wouldn't it be better to have this person's ear, or does it matter at all? I guess it's like the black pill opinion, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm under the personal belief that all governments everywhere are just tyranny. I've always had a problem with authority since I was a kid. Never liked my parents telling me what to do. I've gotten in fights with basically every boss I've ever had, and that's why I quit going to work and started working for myself and stuff.
Amen.
the very sentiment of government and everyone in it is, we want to impose our political will upon you. And with our structure and all the legal structures and stuff, it's like you have to comply or you're going to get thrown in prison or, labeled a terrorist, whatever that is. So just the sentiment of, we need to put our hope and faith in government, it seems like it's sort of self-defeating. I mean, I can't remember the last time that there was a politician that was good, remained good, and died good. And
Yeah, it probably doesn't exist, but I think the choice is the choice that we have here would be being targeted as a terrorist, and now some of my enemies are being targeted as a terrorist instead. So it's tyranny, but I'm like, this is not aimed directly at me. Like, this is like slightly, you know what I mean? I see it as like, oh, slightly better. Instead of having like literally putting in the food, I have a guy with throat cancer, and he says he might not. So I was like, yeah, man, that's a good.
I'll take that.
Maybe not.
Might not. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with the guy that says that he, like, even though he might be lying, he's probably lying, but he's like, he doesn't openly say, I hate you and I want to kill your children. You know what I mean? Like, that's where my mind's at. I understand the tyranny thing, but I'm like, damn, I just can't walk around completely black pill with no solutions, or at least like any kind of like wiggle room for explanation or movement,
Right.
Yeah. I think that's where like faith in the self and realizing like you have to sort of network these things yourself and try to find like local solutions and things like that, because the government's always just going to keep doing what they do and keep trying to expand and spend more money and pass new laws that force shit on us. I mean, when we look at like the CDC director that they just appointed, who came directly from DARPA's biotech spinoff ARPA-H. And then we have like Jay Bhattacharya, who's really, really good friends with Peter Thiel and part of like Jordan Peterson's ARC network, which is essentially positioning itself to be like the right-wing WEF, and getting a bunch of different people. And they earn your trust by saying the things you like. And then when the chips are down and the cards have to be laid on the table, they pull the rug right out from under you.
Right.
It sucks.
Right. I just wish more conspiracy theorists would like, don't ever tie your identity to this. I mean, I tied my identity to Jordan Peterson, but I have since told him to go off, and he's blocked me. But don't tie your identity to a political movement. But if this is moving in the way that I like, I'm going to like swim with that. And then once I realize that they're off, I'm like, all right, we're going somewhere else with these guys. But I don't know. I just don't find the use in tearing down somebody that is doing what I want at the moment. Like, I'll tear you down after. And right. I feel like this community does that a little bit too much. And it's like, well, how are we going to get the boot off of our neck to do anything? But then also, what is the plan? What is the ultimate plan? Most people think that we're already, we're already full blown in it, and there's really no way out of it. But I don't think so.
That's where I find myself in between these two things, where like, I agree with that. You should align yourself with somebody who's aligned with you until the moment they deviate. And then it's, don't identify with that person, break away, say, hey, they did this thing I don't like, and now I'm no longer on that team. Instead of galvanizing to them. And then it's like, let's say a party line thing, Republican, no matter what, Democratic, no matter what. I bounce back and forth between that and, like, at its highest levels, all politics and world events are theater. Yeah. And I lean towards that one a lot more, so it's hard for me to engage with that previous one.
Yeah, and I mean, it is sort of a double-edged sword in the same way they say, like, don't shoot the messenger. I think you also shouldn't love the messenger, like, you should always be vetting people, do your own research. I constantly tell people, like, don't trust me at face value. Go vet my shit and go, if I'm wrong about something, hold me accountable and things like that. And I think people get too endeared with the people that are saying the things that they like and not looking, like, it causes them to look away from the various ties or the things that they actually end up doing and stuff. And if you stick to policy more than people, the policies aren't going to lie to you. People lie all the time, and I think sort of separating that and just focusing on the information and the data and the actions is really, really important.
I want to get into this the implications of this transhumanism, right? We talked about, like, where is the line? But then it's like, also, what is the danger? And that people come at that from a bunch of different angles. I hope to explore some of those now. But we could start with like this idea that, a company or a corporation putting technology in your body, well, then there becomes a rights issue. You know what I mean? Like as far as property rights,
Who
things
owns
of that
that?
nature.
That's a good question.
Yeah. And then there's also the autonomy issue where a very simple microchip can be placed on. This was an experiment that was done in the 90s, and I managed to see some of the footage in the early 2000s on YouTube. You probably still find it, but they put a simple microchip on a cat's brain, and they were able to just send like rudimentary electrical impulses, and those electrical impulses would determine if you stimulated that chip, it would aggravate the aggression centers of the cat's brain, making them hyper aggressive and completely unreconcilable. Or if you didn't send the signal, it would render them totally docile, and you could do whatever you wanted to them. And that was back in the 90s, and that was a simple chip on your brain. So obviously, there's a litany of different negative aspects to, having somebody else's technology in your body.
Yeah. There's this guy, and I think his last name's Havari. But he's the one that you see like Russell Brand like kissing his forehead and stuff. He's that WEF guy. He calls us hackable animals. And
I would agree.
When we look at like 23andMe and Ancestry, where people like submitted their DNA, and we have AI now that's going through. Even Larry Ellison said like, we're gonna have mRNA vaccines specifically for each person based on their DNA and stuff like that. It seems like a very, very slippery slope to something where ever since Trump's gotten inaugurated, they're like redlining this shit. It's always been sort of a slow creep there, but I haven't seen it go this far, this fast, and it is a little concerning. And kind of why I started doing all of this was like, hey guys, just so you know, they're going to put chips in your head. They're going to link us all into the Matrix, and there's spy satellites everywhere that Elon's launching. He's not a good guy. So
what do you make? I don't know where you fall on like a biblical narrative or prophecy, but obviously we'd be remiss if we didn't bring up the whole mark of the beast thing, right? This seems like a technology. You could interpret it that way. A piece of technology that you would either put in the top of your hand or your forehead, and this would enable you to buy or sell or trade goods. Otherwise, you won't be able to if you don't have it, which obviously would create a lot of issues for any segment of the population that would resist it. Now, this Neuralink it's almost a given that it would have some integrated, tap to pay, like you just put your forehead on the thing and you'd be able to pay for shit at the supermarket. Where do you place that, if at all?
I mean, I would agree that it seems like they're almost trying to manufacture prophecy. You look at things like Mike Huckabee, right? That's in Trump's administration, and he's talking about like the end times coming. You have Peter Thiel's Hereticon with like Mike Solana and Michael Schellenberger, that they call it like the apocalypse ball. You have Israel trying to genetically engineer the red heifer and build the third temple and stuff. So I do think they're using that as sort of a blueprint to just make it happen, so that people are like, oh, it's the end times. What are we gonna do? In order to beat the devil, you gotta do this certain thing. And it's Elon, I think, is the closest figure that we have, either Elon or Peter Thiel, but one of them is the closest we have to like the Antichrist, and wanting to pull the wool over people's eyes and put this chip in your head so that you submit to him. And he's the most followed person, I think, on the internet at this point. So so like the whole,
is he more than Trump now?
Elon, I think, has 200 million followers at least on Twitter, and I don't know if he just like mass auto made people follow him. He has that network of bots and stuff. I mean, the bots never went away, but his following is massive.
He's got double the followers, so 220 million almost, and Trump is at 102.7. Rookie numbers.
Gotta pump those up. Let me ask you this, Evan. I've come to a very similar place in my research where I've determined it seems there's a strong argument for the manufacturing of prophecy. But then the question that I'm forced to ask is, does that make the fulfillment of prophecy invalid? In other words, just because a man is doing it, right? Like, for example, they have the ability to cloud seed and alter the weather. That's what they're willing to tell you. But conspiracy theorists, we've suspected for some time that they're just pumping microwaves into the ionosphere and creating localized earthquakes and hurricanes and all kinds of shit. So if you can do that, and some of the prophecy is, let's say, for example, the drying of the Euphrates, well, it seems like you could purposely dry the Euphrates. Does that make it invalid, though? And then I'm wondering, like, is the prophecy still validated in a way that it's like, eventually there will come a time when these things can happen by way of man. And when those times come, this is where we'll be. And I can't answer that question. Like,
Jesus is sitting there and then he's like, damn, they did the earthquakes all over. And he's like, I guess I'll go. Like, I don't think I don't think it works that way. I think it's
but I don't know. I mean, you know, it's you know, because some of the, like, when we're talking about the 4 horsemen, right? It's like war and pestilence, right? Well, okay, they can manufacture through gain of function pestilence, and war will always by its nature be man driven. So, you know what I mean? Like, that's really the hinging point, that war thing. I'm like, war is without man, it does not happen. And so what are we saying then about prophecy? It's an interesting question. I don't expect necessarily you have an answer, but any thoughts on that?
Yeah. So in my belief, a huge driver of all of these things is the Chabad Lubavitch, because they're sort of like a cultish section of Judaism, where, you know, they believe in like the Kabbalah and the books within the Kabbalah, like the Talmud, the Torah, or the Talmud, the Tanya, and the Zohar. And I think that they believe that they can play God or trick God into bringing about this end times, because on the other side of that is like this golden age. And I mean, they refer to it all the time in their belief system, or the world to come has also been used. And I mean, there's references to that in the Bible as well. And, you know, we're seeing the golden age of abundance through the Trump campaign. And
right.
I think all of that is an allusion to like, hey, we're, you know, especially pushing war with Iran, which is, you know, supposed to be considered the start of the apocalypse and World War III and stuff. So I think that they believe that it will legitimize what they're doing by following prophecy, but I think they're also prophesized to fail, which is
right.
I think super.
It's an odd thing, right, to be rushing towards when, like, but I mean, I guess obviously they disagree. Yeah. And so I don't know. It's something that has been on my mind a lot lately, and because, like I said, it's very obvious the many ways in which they are manufacturing, but then it just comes into question the validity of that prophecy. Then is it still being? I mean, if you live in a time where, let's say, the prophecy is real and you live in this realm, and all these things do happen, just by virtue of them happening all at once and in sequence, is it I don't know. But I agree with you, Seven. I see that, especially the red heifers, right? It's like they have a farm that is dedicated to manufacturing or producing a genetically perfect red heifer. And then, of course, these rabbinic Jews, they go there to check it. Like that's the whole purpose of that. I believe they were found in Texas. That's the purpose of that farm, is to create that red heifer. So now you're manufacturing prophecy by way of genetic manipulation. Man, a lot of questions, and I don't know that we're going to have the answer to that. But
it's interesting though that they did get the red heifer in this time period. Like, it's not, they didn't get it 20 years ago, but they got him kind of now. So I'm like, what the hell does that mean? You know, buy the shirt, whatever.
Get your red heifer shirt.
Times prophecy.
So one of the
I
other
believe they burned them already. They said that they already
they had to, because there was a certain amount of time. They had to be a certain age, and there was no limit on how old they could be. But the problem was, the longer they stick around, the higher the likelihood that they would become blemished in some way. They would get yoked, or they would suddenly develop like several white hairs in one follicle, which is kind of, it's like you can have white hairs on them or other colored hairs, but you can't have more than one per follicle or something like that. And then once that happens, then they're no longer, they don't make the cut. And I know they wanted to do it by Passover, but that was like Passover of last year. And then what happened is the government of Israel became, the Hamas, leader of Hamas actually said that part of the reason for the October 7th debacle was because of the red heifers. And so that created a lot of contention. And with that contention comes danger. And so they actually had to kind of put it all behind a veil. They stopped televising it. They stopped reporting on it. So yeah, I don't know. Dude's looking at it with a magnifying glass. I don't know if they ever did it, but to me, I just know that time was not in favor of them. And the way they celebrated when they found these red heifers, like this was.
It was interesting to see like the Daily Wire people. I forget her name. One of the girl reporters, she was like, "Isn't this great?" And we're like, "This is like, these are people trying to bring about end times prophecy. This sucks." And she was like, "That's not what it means. It just means we're going to erect the third temple." And I was like, "Listen," and people were just beating her up online. But I was like, how dense do you have to be, like, to not understand that, like, most people around you don't like this, don't like what you're doing?
Yeah.
Well, it took them some time. They got there, and that's why they stopped talking about it. So yeah, I mean, that's just another one of those things, many things in the bucket of manufactured prophecy. If so, valid or not, I don't know. But we now have this Project Stargate that Donald Trump, right, his administration is working on in conjunction with Elon Musk. And it is this, it's very strange. The whole thing is strange unless you have, the right lens to look at it through. But this union of mRNA technology and artificial intelligence, and they're calling it Project Stargate. I don't even want to say anything. What are your thoughts on that, Seven?
Yeah. So, obviously we saw the introduction of like mRNA tech with the COVID vaccine and stuff. And we have Larry Ellison talking about, cancer vaccines. What's really happening, in my opinion, is they are every vaccine, in my opinion, is that has been used against us. It is shown that it decreases the body's ability to create antibodies, and it also serves as like an immunosuppressant. Mm-hmm. And I think that they're using that in order to introduce nanotechnology and adulterants and foreign objects into the body to prevent you from fighting those things off, and your body sort of becoming more viable to introducing all of these different things, having the brain chip, having nanobots in your head. Elon's talked about a neural lattice that he wants to have over people's brains, right, so that he can, control the functionality of them. You have graphene oxide, which they're now starting to say not only passes through the blood-brain barrier, but can be sort of assigned to different areas to create internal electrodes. So even if you don't get the brain chip, it's like they're still trying to get in your head and stuff. And when we look at AI and sort of how they're using that to take everyone's DNA and create profiles for people, and we have the CDC director, that lady from ARPA H, she's given multiple speeches about how AI is going to transform the medical industry forever. And
BlackRock just bought all of our DNA from Ancestry. This is not good.
We have 23andMe, who is run by Ann Wojcicki. I guess they're supposedly going bankrupt. I think that's sort of just a theater thing to either buy it up on the cheap or sell it to somebody and wash their hands of it. But Ann Wojcicki used to be married to Sergey Brin, and they both went to Epstein Island. Epstein was a staunch transhumanist and eugenicist and stuff. He talked about like freezing his head and his penis to, resurrect in a future generation.
Wow, that's very Nimrod-esque, huh?
Yeah, that's very Osiris, same thing though. Yeah.
Also, don't want to interrupt, but Ann Wojcicki, sister of the other Wojcicki, owner of
Susan.
YouTube, that Susan, that died. Yeah, or CEO of YouTube.
Yeah, and I saw a post. I haven't yet verified this, so I'm not going to say that it is true, but apparently their father had ties to DARPA, if I'm
Wouldn't
not
surprise
mistaken.
me. even a little bit.
Well,
Even a
now
little
it's
bit.
true. Like I told you at the top of the episode, if it's on the internet, it's true. So
The world gets really small at the top. Like once you start getting to the top of these fight, everybody knows each other. Everybody runs in the same circles. Everybody has this massive crossover, and everybody's cousins.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
it.
I mean,
yeah.
You look at like the genealogy of like the U.S. presidents. And
Oh my
seeing
God,
that
yeah.
almost all of them, I think, except for 2 maybe.
Yeah,
are
something like that.
part
That
of the
was
same bloodline.
that became really big in the early 2000s when they like breaking on Fox News. Some little girl was tasked with doing a famous person's family tree. She picks Obama and finds out that she's in like elementary school. She finds out like,
I remember
isn't
that.
it adorable that everybody is related to the except for like 3 presidents? And everyone's like, oh, that's so cool. I'm like, wait a second.
I love
What do you mean that's so cool?
I love how they reveal it. Their methodology of revelation is just so interesting. The way they do it, it's comical in a way. Like you've got to laugh at it. Where are you at on lizard people? Because they're talking about president's blood. So
Yeah.
what are you thinking about that?
That is an excellent question, and I get asked that a lot, especially through my associations with Ike. I haven't researched it enough to say that one way or the other, and that is something that I'm planning on changing. But I don't discount it because I mean, just looking at all of the things that have absolutely blown my mind and shattered my previous understanding of reality. I don't think that there's a lack of merit to it if it's coming from someone like, I mean, he's never, rescinded that or taken it back or said I was wrong.
David Icke has never been like, you know what? I think I went too far with the lizard people. Like he's stood his ground on that. And I'm like 90% of the way there with him.
Yeah.
No, he's legit. I think he's go ahead. I'll say it after.
No, you're good. I just see like sort of this track record with him, and like he's banned in like 30 countries and stuff, and again, don't love the messenger, love the message, and from the things that I've seen him say, the more the time passes, the more that he seems to get right, and he's talked about like having firsthand accounts with some of these things. I think Billy Corgan from the Smashing Pumpkins was like, I slept with a shapeshifter once. And
I watched that interview. He gave it on Howard Stern, and he said it was the same person twice. So he gave an interview with Howard where he said like he watched somebody transform before his eyes, and Howard
And he had
said,
sex with it.
Then he had sex with it. No, well, Howard asked who, and he was like, I don't want to like say it on air or whatever. And then he was invited back on the show a number of years later, and he's like, hey, are you still sticking by that story? He's like, not only am I sticking by that story, I saw the same person do it again for a second time.
Can we just call it a shapeshiftussy? Hell yeah.
Shapeshiftussy. There you go. Got that shape. Yeah, I don't know, man. I think there's some real veracity to it. I think that they are. What's up, Top?
Yeah, no, because we come from it from the biblical lens, so it's a little bit of a different angle than David Icke or other people will come at this idea, but we always end up in the same territory. So it would make sense that there are these lizard people, if you believe in the Genesis 6 narrative of the fallen angels and the Nephilim that are now pervading the earth, that were pervading the earth before Genesis 6, but also after, which it says in the Bible. A race of these angels, the seraphim, do have characteristics and physical traits of lizards, snakes, which is where you get the idea of the snake in the garden. That's like Lucifer, and Lucifer being one of the nefarious type of angels that fell. But all the angels that fell weren't of the same category. Some of them, like Moloch, might look like an owl sometimes, or might look like a cow. Right, like a bull.
Because like even the cherubim had like the face of a man, the face of an eagle, the face of an oxen, and the face of something else. I forgot what the fuck it is. But just to lay it out, is eagle, oxen, man, and there's something very obvious that I'm forgetting, and it's gonna upset me. But either way, I think just to show you how crazy we are in this show, all of those mythological creatures and cryptids and such, I think they're all some of them are chimeric experiments that I think our own military is engaged in, but I think that a lot of them are actually the lineage of those things. Like they went forward, they mated with human beings, which is why all those cryptids and creatures from mythology are like half human, half there are some kind of chimeric mashup. I think there's actually a basis for them all stemming from this big divergence that happened where these entities were cast out and basically just solidified themselves as our rulers here on the planet.
to meet one might not to meet one is probably not wrong, not wrong. Most likely you did meet one at some point, and it's probably more common than you think.
Right.
They're probably all around the place, you know.
Yeah.
Well, what's crazy too is like tying it back to the whole transhumanism thing. I mean, we have, IVF, artificial wombs that are coming out. Elon's been talking about that, and Vivek Ramaswamy, when he was doing his fellowship at the George Soros Fellowship, owned by George Soros's brother, he actually wrote like a dissertation on human-animal chimeras.
Vivek?
Yeah.
He's got a suspiciously long skull.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of.
I don't
Look, man,
like
I
that
think
guy.
it's literally Ecclesiastes. Nothing new is under the sun. We're in some sort of a loop. It's happening
But
again and
wait.
again.
Let's not get off the subject. So what did Elon say about IVF?
So I just see it as he's getting with all of these women and using them as sort of brood mares, and really wanting to get away from there being like a natural human element to reproduction. I think he's sort of a spokesperson for that. Other people I'm thinking of is like Andrew Schultz's last special was talking all about IVF and his experience with And I think it's this move. I mean, there's like FDA articles and things like that they've written where they're actively in the trial stages for artificial wombs, and there's a couple bills that got passed, or not passed, but they got introduced for like you're not allowed to. I believe it was masturbation, was they were trying to like outlaw that, and like sex and pleasure and and trying to vilify one of the very few things that we have that we can still give each other to like be happy and feel good and stuff.
Yeah.
And with
They took
Elon
it away
Musk,
from the Dolphins, and now us, man.
And now we're gonna end up ourselves just like the Dolphins. God damn it.
yeah, and like when you get into like the gene editing and the CRISPR portion of it, and sort of trying to manufacture what I think is like the human 2.0 that they're going for. And really, it just sort of dehumanizes the entire thing. Yeah,
Dude,
exactly.
I think all of that it's all connected, right? It connects to the Rogan thing. It connects to the UFO thing. Like, so it connects to the telepathy thing. They're trying to do something. They're trying to bridge the gap. And I do think, because we said this is, we look at things through the biblical narrative. I think it's the exact same thing that was happening, because when I look at Genesis 6, it seems very obvious that there's like a genealogy war going on. There's the seed of these fallen entities when they integrated with mankind, and then there is just human beings. And I think it's always been a genetic battle, and I think that they're doing the same thing now with this UFO phenomenon, because you always have this hybridization, right? These nonverbal telepathic children, they call them the black-eyed children. There's some unholy mashup of us and like the Greys. And then you listen to Rogan talk, and he's like, I don't know, man, I think the Greys are they might be us in the future, like our mouths and everything get really small because we don't need to eat anymore, and like our heads get really big because we're so intelligent, and we don't have like sexual organs because we're not anymore, and everything's done through telepathy. And I'm like, I don't think they're us at all. I think they're actually something. Actually, I suspect the Greys are probably our own technology, our own military, because they always go hand in hand. You get abducted and you have a experience in a lab somewhere surrounded by soldiers, but also entities. It's really, but I think all these things overlap in a huge way. And I do think, like, as soon as you mentioned the IVF thing, like Top has been going off about that for a while now. And it's like, I don't think they're that Elon is these chicks. I think he's just
Right.
Inseminating them. And
Well, the girl from Neuralink, he's from what I read about it, there's not a romantic relationship there. It's a business relationship. She's like the CFO of Neuralink, and he's the owner. I don't even know why. I guess he just has the money, and he just keeps knocking her up. And so now she's got 2 kids from her. He's got 2 kids from her. But did they have sex to have these kids? Like that other girl, Ashley St. Clair. I don't even know if she had sex with him to have these kids either. But I know his first wife, they had like 3 kids through IVF. It's just very shady. And then on the heels of this, the Trump announcement, which he was campaigning on, saying he wanted to make it free, but now he's going to lower the cost of it. I just wonder, with that kind of government interference or the government manipulation within IVF, how much of the fetuses that or the eggs that you produce do they own? How much of your sperm that they, because it's very expensive to store this stuff. Like you could implant 1 or 2 or 3 and have triplets, but oftentimes there will be over 10 viable fetuses in these test tubes. So who's storing them? What are they doing with them? And if I was running a genetic cloning program or something like that, like this is exactly what I'd want to do. Nobody attending this shit, I was like, free reign.
Especially when you have like an old system. The old way you used to do it is like you had to use some weird tech and back engineered
back engineered UFOs, take you from your house, put something in your butt. This sucks.
You gotta laser off like half a cow's face and take their uterus, like all kinds of weird shit. Now it's like, what if we got people very much the same way with the MK Ultra program? It's like, how do we scale this up? Well, what if we had people doing this shit to themselves? What if we had them lining up to have us do it for them? Well, that would work a lot better.
Yeah, and too, like, looking at who's funding these companies that are doing these things and the financiers behind it, and they want to say X amount of these fetuses weren't viable, and they say they dispose of. How are they disposing of them? Where are they going? What are they doing with them? Because you basically just like relent ownership of those things over to this company, and they could be going through your DNA, they could be genetically engineering these things into people for all we know.
Right.
There's really no telling.
Well, that's my thing, is like, even with the ancestry.com, it's like, if you look at the shady happenings at Planned Parenthood, we already established its beginnings, right? But then they have these really like high profile events, or they should be higher profile, right? They should be in the news a lot more than they are, when all of a sudden employees at Planned Parenthood are selling baby parts to the black market. And what happens is Planned Parenthood backs off and they go, hey, that's not indicative of the entire operation. Those are just individuals, and so don't blame us for that. But it's like, well, what if you, once again, if you had people line up for that instead? So not only do you have people lining up to kill their own babies, but also now you can go over here and it's like all the genetic material you could ever need can be yours without all of the messy getting caught with employee shit, right? You just say, hey, these eggs are non-viable, or this material is now waste, biological waste, and then it goes off to some black site where they're doing the thing anyway. So I think it's so much of this shit, I just look at them as like, this is a pretty good program. It's a little problematic. How do we refine this? And how do we get people to think that it's good for them so they line up for it? And then it's like they just knock it out of the park over and over again. With
you
that
pair it with microplastics in your food, so that way sperm count is lowered, or polycystic ovarian, PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome is just out of control in women, and they can't regulate their cycle, so you can't. I mean, there's a 1,000 different ways to do this, and birth rates are on the decline. So it's like, here's your solution, but also we get like 7 out of those 10 babies or some shit. It's wild.
But don't worry, that's just medical waste, and they're not viable anymore. We're going to toss them out. Meanwhile, they cart them off to some deep underground military base that's filled with black-eyed children. You know what I mean? Like they're taking those things and they're mashing them up with whatever fallen angels or some crazy shit like that. And I mean, that just brings me back full circle. It's like nothing new is under the sun. Everything that people suspected was happening back in the day in biblical times, where they're creating chimeric, creatures, and they're involved in all this, it's still happening. It's just shinier than it used to be.
Yeah, I always like to say when it comes to like the powers that be, government, shadow government, whatever you want to call it, think of the worst thing that you possibly can, and then it's 10 times worse than that. That's what they're actually doing.
That is what they're actually doing. We're coming up here on the 1.5-hour mark. I want to respect your time, Seven. So why don't we bring this in for a landing? Before we do you have any final thoughts on this whole transhumanism thing?
Yeah, I think it's really important for people to understand that the whole transhumanist movement is being sort of ushered in through the medical industry. We have, for years now, have had multiple people in, the NIH with Fauci. We have the CDC and things like that, where they're planning on selling you this thing that's going to be a promise to be a good thing. And it, just like with the Donald Trump presidency, it's a Trojan horse. Just like with X, it's a Trojan horse. You guys don't trust the government. Never trust the government. They're lying to you, and they always have been, and they always will. And then looking at Elon Musk's, he created this thing called the fork in the road sculpture. And he said that he had to make sure that civilization took the path most likely to pass the Fermi Great Filters. And that has a lot of allusion to, well, there has to be life out there in the universe, and we have to make sure that we're ready as a species to be able to combat potential threats and stuff like that. So I think that also brings in like the controlled UFO disclosure and trying to normalize that in people's heads as well. That, hey, ultimately we're going to have this like Emmanuel Goldstein in space that is like this fictitious thing that they're going to, it could be a drone swarm, it could be, you know, AI generated footage or something like that to create this mass hysteria to convince you that you need the brain chip in order to survive, hook us up into a singularity and a one world government. So just don't put anything that the government gives you in or on your body. Try to avoid wearables if you can, and just say no.
That is fair. I think it's just weird that we have to be in a time where you have to warn people, like, don't put anything in your body that the government gives you.
Yeah.
Because we're literally right there, and they're going to be giving you something soon, and it's going to look really great. And honestly, we're probably all going to die because we'll get by the superior species on the planet that now has Neuralink and knows every single thing, you know, in an instant. In an instant, they're getting all this information. And I don't know how the hell we're ever going to catch up, but I'm not putting it in my head either.
I'm not either. You won't be alone, brother.
That's it.
Me neither.
We'll be
So
totally effective together.
I'm like, I usually don't love ending episodes, but I really want to end this one with the sign off.
It's very dark.
Yeah, it's very no, not because of that, just because of the sign off. David, anything else?
No, dude. I think that's all I got. So one more time, Seven, let everybody know where they can find your work, brother.
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me 7Cs_ on Twitter. I'm also on Rumble. If you search, I believe it's 7Cs Live. I have Iconic as well. I have my Iconic series linked in my Twitter profile. First month is just $2, and you get 30 days worth of content, not only from me, but David's entire back catalog, everything from his son and other members on Iconic. Rich is really good if you guys want to explore the occult symbolism and things like that behind all of these things. And
Who's Rich?
Rich.
I know
Willett.
who Rich is. Yeah, he's pretty cool. He's also on the network, right?
Yeah, he's he's been with them since the beginning. But a lot of the stuff that I've learned, like as far as the occult tie-ins to all this stuff, came from him and like his study of the Kabbalah and like Chris Burkenis and people like that who've been doing it for 20 years. So back when I was in like middle school, they were trying to like decipher the Kabbalah and mysticism and things like that. So really, really good people, really down to earth. And, you know, they let me in, and I'm just a guy in his room who started to notice patterns and stuff. And there's nothing they said that I couldn't say or cover. So that makes me like them.
That's awesome.
Hey, Seven,
That's awesome.
are you also dangerous?
Oh.
I wouldn't say that I'm dangerous. Maybe if you consider the truth a weapon, but other than that,
there it is.
There you go. All right. Yeah.
He is.
Our mutuals in our fan base, we refer to them as dangerous retards. I think I am one as well.
I'm definitely one.
But it's a bit of a branding that we have going on here, and I think we should take back that word from the actual retards that have stolen it and parading around with
ones. We don't like those. Not the negative retards. We're the dangerous retards.
Yes.
All right, man. I guess that's it. Let's thank you for your time, brother. It's been an awesome conversation, and I know the audience love this, and it's something that we've been meaning to dive into for a while, and I'm glad that you were here to do it with us. So thanks for your time, and I guess
guys,
I guess that's it, right?
As always, don't forget to, I know you're gonna love it, obey, submit, and comply. We'll see you later.
The greatest hypnotist on planet Earth is a oblong box in the corner of the room. It is constantly telling us what to believe is real.
You can persuade them that what they see with their eyes is what there is to see. You can't. Because they'll laugh in the face of an explanation that portrays the bigger picture of what's happening. And they have.